Google has once again been called into question after a leaked video showed the company's executives expressing disappointment back in 2016 at Donald Trump's election win. Donald Corter picks up the story.
Google's always tried to maintain an apolitical front, but a recent leak tells a very different story. And if true, it outlines Google's executives' pick for president in the 2016 presidential elections.
Most people here are pretty upset and pretty sad because of the election. I certainly find this election deeply offensive, and I know many of you do too.
This is none other than Sergey Brin, Google's co-founder, and if his assumption that every worker in the video was a Clinton voter was upsetting, it gets worse.
That was the first moment I really felt like we were going to lose, and it was really painful. It did feel like a ton of bricks dropped on my chest.
And that right there is the chief financial officer of Google's parent company, Alphabet, Ruth Porat, holding back tears at the thought of their election defeat. But whose defeat exactly? Last time I checked, Google wasn't a wing of the Democratic Party. Nevertheless, they seem to have a mutual understanding on why Trump won.
Xenophobia, hatred, and a desire for answers that may or may not be there.
Here we have Senior Vice President for Global Affairs, Kent Walker. Looks like despite Google's claim to objectivity, Walker's got some pretty partisan views on American politics. But Google maintains those are personal views, ones that don't affect their product.
Boredom led to the rise of fascism and also to the communist revolution. I think it's worth being very vigilant and thinking about all these issues. What can we do to lead to maybe a better quality of governance, decision-making, and so forth?
Solid explanation of ideologies that shaped the 21st century, Sergey. But fair enough. Google is looking for ways to make the world better. But that hasn't stopped the flow of accusations that their strategy is politically biased. Like that time Google removed a pro-life singer's music video on YouTube.
They said a baby's a big mistake. I had no choice. What was your name? What were you meant to be? Wish I could have known you.
And YouTube's moved to hit popular users before, conservative users especially.
While President Trump is draining the swamp, Diamond and Silk is going to be exposing the swamp. We're making a movie, y'all.
But there are some at Google who don't agree with the company's liberal leanings. James Damore, a conservative engineer, wrote a memo, just a memo, to highlight potential bias in Google's policy. And he was fired for it.
Google has several biases, and owner's discussion about these biases is being silenced by the dominant ideology. What follows is by no means the complete story, but it's a perspective that desperately needs to be told at Google.
Google has always claimed its hands were clean when it came to political bias. Hate speech or other inappropriate content, the company always claimed it had its reasons. But with insight into what the top brass at Google is apparently thinking, perhaps it's time for a better understanding of what bias really means. Donald Corter, RT.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we have with us the esteemed Major General Paul Vallely. And the reason why I played that clip, ladies and gentlemen, is simply to show you that the left never got over the election of 2016. And while they are screaming that we should unify and come together and stop the evil rhetoric, we never forget the fact that big tech played a very heavy role in election 2020. Good evening, Major General. It's a great honor to have you here tonight. I got to ask you here, Major General, has big tech literally stolen this election for Donald Trump 2020?
Well, they've attempted to. That's all I can say at this point in time. But if you look at one of those reels you had in there, there was two words in there: dominant ideology. Dominant ideology. And so what makes it dominant today are Google, Twitter, Facebook, because they dominate the international seen as well, not only in the United States, but the effect they have across the globe now. And that pressure and that ideology is definitely dominant, but we are going to defeat that dominant technology by a dominant conservative technology and ideology.
I love it. There are people tonight, and I'm glad you said that. There are people tonight that have only access to local television. And as much as we
Right.
worked over the years in terms of networking together and getting the message out there that things are a little more different than what's being reported on the local networks and also cable, these things that they have been told tonight that Joe Biden won the election honestly, fair and square, that there was no cheating, no proof, no evidence. When you listen to that particular propaganda, what are your thoughts for the American people in terms of seeking alternative news sources?
Well, I'm involved actually now in looking at an alternative news source as people go away from Fox News and move more towards Newsmax and One American Network. But I'm involved in looking at a whole new concept for a media organization. But when we look at the dominance that they have in the marketplace, uh, it's quite penetrating when you think of it. And when you go to the airports, for example, and you're sitting there before we had COVID, everything was CNN.
Yep.
Every lounge, CNN. There was no alternative. And I remember when I was working in the deep state in the swamp, when I was with Fox News back there, that initially you couldn't get Fox News, for example, which was the conservative news media network. And we had to actually try to send letters and attempt to get Fox News on the air, and finally it worked. But it's psychological. This is a psychological operations program at its finest. China is good at this. Russian was good at this. But this is to change the mindset of the American people. This treason, this sedition, this dominance by the technology companies, the dominance by the news networks. This is to affect the mind and how you think. And it's worked to a great degree, Ken. And guess where? The most? In the colleges of the United States, in our schools. I mean, it is just unbelievable what our young people have gone through at these universities that have then been supported by tax dollars. I mean, how did we get here, Ken? That's my question. In 2020, how did America get here at this point in time? I don't understand that.
I don't understand either. I'm glad that you're here to give your expertise, because you mentioned the fact of China and Russia. And yet, most Americans have been told that the greatest existential threat to America is not China and the Communist Party of China. It is actually global warming. And I got to get your insights on how did the left work so hard to convince people that changing the temperature 1 degree over 100 years is worth all of the money in the world?
Ken, you couldn't have made that up in Hollywood.
No!
I mean, you couldn't make this up. There's no way you could create this. It's amazing. Well, we had the great Al Gore,
Yes.
Who flew around the world in his jets and all that. But it's just a fraud. It's a total fraud on America, on the world, where, I live in Montana, and our winters and our summers and our springs, they haven't changed but very little every year for 20 years that I've been here. And I've been on this. I had my birthday yesterday, by the way, Ken. I was 81 yesterday.
To you, sir.
Well, thank you. But still going strong. But it's, I sit here at 81 years old, and I think of my grandson at 8 years old. And he lives in one of the most liberal communities in America. And I'm just concerned about what he's being taught in the schools, for example. I hope it's better than I anticipate or think. But it's a brainwash. What we have going on here is a brainwash by high tech, by the media, by professors in these liberal schools, particularly if you look at Harvard, Yale. I went to West Point, and
Yes.
they've even been able to seduce West Point to some degree, which really upsets me a lot. But that's what we're going through is a brainwash here, and we have to be smart enough and believe in the Constitution, believe in being a patriot, and what we value in our country. And it's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
You know, and I used to be a ombudsman for the Federal Voting Assistance Program at the Pentagon, and it uniquely struck me that the majority, I mean a super majority of those that were in the military were conservative by nature, voted Republican, and yet the Obama administration was able to seduce the military icon to believe that uh, making Marines wear panties and high heels would make them more comparable or at least acknowledgeable to what a woman experience. I want to get your comments because we've come a long way from communism being identified under the Eisenhower administration at the Pentagon, and how it just seems to have super spread throughout. Your comments, your thoughts.
Well, you know what we call it, Ken?
What's that?
Social engineering.
Ah.
Okay? It's social engineering. So we're trying to engineer society, our culture, our thought process, and so on. And it was integrated into the Pentagon, by the way, and at the academies. Rather than teaching engineering and warfighting strategies, we spend more time on social engineering now, and it's just incredible. But it's a propaganda campaign. There's no doubt about it, and I understand that part of warfare very very well. But it is a war. We have a civil war going on in this country, and those of us that believe in the Constitution and don't want to try to destroy it and get rid of the Electoral College and all the things, First Amendment, Second Amendment, all those things blend in to what the war is about. And we have to stand tall and defeat it.
Major General, that people get really antsy when you use the term civil war. That right. Doesn't fit within the scope of what's commanded by the left. That's not a good term to use. But you and I both know that we have been at a civil war in this country since the end of the last civil war. Simply put, that there are individuals who do not want the Constitution to work, and that there are those who do want the Constitution to work, like you and me. And so, in regards to the Constitution, we have someone named Sidney Powell who's working on the outside in, and she mentioned the Kraken. And right. I wanted to give you an opportunity because you are aware of Lieutenant, and probably know them best, Lieutenant General Flynn and Lieutenant General McInerney. And they
know them both well. They're very good friends. I know them both very well. Exactly. Matter of fact, General McInerney and I wrote the book Endgame in 2004. Exactly. Went to West Point together.
Exactly.
Anyhow, sorry to interrupt you.
No. And see, this is why America needs your voice. They don't need to listen to Neil Cavuto on Fox News. He can't freaking tell me anything because you have the knowledge and the wherewithal that he lacks. And so he mentions the Kraken, but he also mentioned that 2 weeks ago that the military special forces were used to secure servers in Frankfurt, Germany. And it seemed to be in a battle against the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, literally an internal war in which 5 soldiers perished. I wanted to get your thoughts. Can you confirm any of that? Is that knowledge for the open marketplace? And if it did happen, why do the mainstream media not report on that?
Well, let me give you a little background. In Frankfurt, Germany, at our consulate over there, they set up a special section of the FBI and CIA over there. and of course they do run the operations of the high tech nature there,
Yes.
with servers and so on. So that is true. I have no more definitive information than you do on the soldiers that went in the special forces or whatever, and we haven't heard much about it, Ken, in the last couple of days, as you know.
Yeah.
So more to come on that, but evidently the supercomputer Kraken and a lot was being done out of that American consulate in Frankfurt. So all I can say is more to come on that.
Well, there are lots of Americans who are sitting by on the edge of their seat at this point because they're looking at the calendar and they're saying, Major General, we only have 14 more days and the electoral college, and then it's over. And even though I tell people that the president has until the 20th of January to pull this thing out, the media is saying on the 14th it's over. It's absolutely over. Joe Biden becomes president. What message do you want to give the American people regarding the time schedule, the time frame for what the president has to do legally in this matter?
Well, through the courts, of course, and then the state legislatures have a vote in Congress to decide the last part of that decision-making process, who will be the president of the United States. The timeline here is very condensed, as you just said, Ken.
Yes.
And like I mentioned earlier, we have to have the evidence. Trump's team has to have people that will testify. And, once you flip a few of these people, they're going to take it all the way to Obama and his secret clandestine operation in Washington, D.C., which I understand is not too far from the White House.
Exactly.
But we cannot allow whatever we can do. We cannot allow Biden to be president of the United States and Kamala Harris. I'm sorry. They're going down the wrong road for America. Going down the wrong road.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. Many people don't believe that there is a shadow government going on. They have identified the swamp, and that has become nomenclature in our society.
Right.
But there is an underground governance, and it's not that you're wearing aluminum foil when you say this. The Obamas have never left the White House, in a sense. Am I correct in that regard?
Well, they moved a few blocks away, and then they bought their $12 million or $15 million mansion up, I guess, in the Hamptons, was it? I can't remember exactly where they bought it. But they all get rich, and if they're going to do a job, you ought to look at Biden's tax returns over the last couple of years.
Yes.
And what's Barr done? I am so dissatisfied with the FBI, the CIA, the Attorney General, the Justice Department. What is wrong with that? They're totally infected. I don't understand. And then evidently, I've had a lot of confidence in Barr to come out with some things, and even Durham, against all this treasonous and sedition activity taken up by Clapper, by Comey, by Brennan.
Yes.
Excuse me. So I think that frustrates me more than anything is the dereliction of duty of our Department of Justice so far. Dereliction of duty.
We were screaming and howling outside of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue that you needed to get rid of Christopher Wray at the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI. And yet today he's still the FBI director. Did Donald Trump actually arrow his own Achilles tendon by the trust in these individuals to do something that they waited 4 years to do and never got done?
Absolutely. And the first one was General Flynn out of the box should have protected him. But Trump has so many balls he's juggling every day, and he looks at other people to recommend personnel changes and so on. Finally, they made a good one at Department of Defense. But, even these recalcitrant generals that worked for Obama and couldn't win a war in 20 years that have signed a petition against Trump, and I know many of them, But I say to them, if you could have won the war, not keeping these never-ending wars and unnecessary wars like Iraq and even Vietnam, that I served two campaign tours over there, that Trump's been right all along in regarding the military, getting us out of the Middle East. We have no business being over there as far as the military anymore. It doesn't serve our purpose. They're not a threat to the United States. Iraq was never a threat to the United States, by the way.
True.
They had some WMD. They moved them to Syria, and they never found them. And there we go in the Middle East, setting the Middle East on fire. And I blame the Bushes for that. That what I've called the Bushies. They were responsible for all of this happening, and they've never apologized for all of these wounded warriors, Ken.
Yeah.
The amount of people we've lost in unnecessary war. And yet the Bushes come out and they'll vote for Biden. They join the Clintons and so on. It's a cabal. Is that the way they say it? C-A-B-A-L?
Yes.
Huh?
Major General, it is a tremendous honor and pleasure to have you back with us. I'm going to try to get you back in a couple of weeks on the air as we talk about the 14th and try to give calm to those in the midst of the storm. Sometimes the warriors on the battlefield don't understand exactly the strategy that's being used to win the war, and they're hoping that Donald Trump will win, but they are watching CNN and Fox, and they are becoming desperately fogged and disappointed to the point where they've given up. In your final words with us, what encouragements can you give to the American people that we can win this battle against the left uniformly, but specifically win the battle to keep President Trump in office?
Okay, stand your ground. Stand up what you believe in. Stand up for our Constitution, for our liberty, our freedom, and look to the future, what it's going to be like for our younger people. We have got to protect that. We can't let this country go the way of socialism and communism. And this is what the left has taken. This is what the Democratic Party has come to. Stand tall, be a proud American, and be ready to fight if you have to.
Paul Vallely, ladies and gentlemen, who is Major General, retired from the U.S. Army. What a tremendous warrior, and certainly one of the great statesmen of our time. We look forward to him coming back in a couple of weeks to talk about where we are. Thank you so much for being with us tonight, sir.
Thank you, Ken.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're not through. We got a lot of stuff ahead of us. In fact, I'm going to show you in a clip. In fact, I'm going to add that clip now so it gets recorded so that you'll see it. But someone, Chris Karamoshi, forgive me, answered me on Facebook the other day, and when I put out the video about the hacking, you all remember that, where the woman actually ended up crying because she realized that the Diebold voting machine could be hacked and done while she watched. She cried because she imagined the republic falling as a result of the banana republic being introduced. Hugo Chavez type voting. Well, tonight I want to show Chris Karamoshi and the rest of the left how it was done.
Newsflash, it has already happened around the world. That's what the propagandists of the feckless fourth estate in America don't want you to know. They also don't want you to remember that there was a time not so long ago when it served the left-wing media's ideological agenda to expose the grave security risks of automated voting machines. Just 2 short years ago, the liberal social media outfit Now This sounded the alarm over vulnerable voting machines with a video showing that, quote, a hacker only needs 1 minute to change election results in 24 states. Twitter didn't censor that or label it. Now they just pretend it doesn't exist.
The serial console in the back gives us a root shell.
That means you have control of the machine.
Have full control of that, and then we can change the results of what it's scanning.
This is the way that you get data in and out of the operating system that runs on this machine.
My computer is connected to the machine. This is a serial cable, and it's connected to the back of the machine. Take off the back of the machine, and there's a serial port, and that gives us full root access with no password.
There's no security subsystem on this one.
Nope, there's no password on it. With this kind of access, you could rewrite the code that's running on there and get it to count votes in whatever way you wanted. You would do this in advance of election night and then wait for the results to come in.
You could control the election results.
Either way, as long as I had physical access to either plug something in or take off the back and plug something in there.
But you just need that access briefly.
Once, yes, very briefly.
About how long?
If you had this all prepped and ready to go, a minute.
A minute. 3 companies implicated in worldwide election meddling scandals are intertwined through a labyrinth of shell companies: Dominion, Smartmatic, and Sequoia. Dominion Voting Systems manufactures both election hardware and software with headquarters in Toronto, Canada, and Denver, Colorado. Smartmatic is the multinational corporation that makes vote counting machines as well as software and is purportedly tied to the late Venezuelan dictator Hugo Chavez's regime. Smartmatic machines have used Dominion software. Sequoia, which was acquired by Dominion in 2010, makes voting machines that have used Smartmatic software. Watchdogs in the Philippines have grappled with what they believe is widespread Smartmatic and Dominion-related election manipulation for 10 years. Attorney and former Filipino Congressman Glenn Chong scoured audit logs to uncover how Smartmatic machines had somehow preloaded and transmitted thousands of votes before polls even opened.
Michelle, the term preloaded is exactly the same term I'm using here in Manila. Preloaded votes. Preloaded ballots. Again, I point this out to our audience. Look at these pieces of documents. They are signed. We have 70,000 voters. About exactly 4,114 ballots were already scanned by 145 voting machines days before the elections. That's over around 6 or 7%.
Chong notes similarities in how he says his race and others in the Philippines were rigged with what happened here in America.
I've said that my case in my district in Biliran, Philippines, is exactly the same case as in the case of President Trump. He was ahead on the night of the election, and then his lead was wiped out all throughout the day, the next day. That's the same thing with me. I was overtaken at 5:56 in the morning the following day, the day following the elections. In the case of Senator Ferdinand Marcos Jr., he was ahead on the night of the elections. He was ahead by 943,045 votes. That was his lead. Within a few hours, by 3 o'clock in the morning, 3:26, if I remember it right, 3:26 in the morning, all the 943,045 votes lead of Senator Ferdinand Marcos Jr. was wiped.
That's right, wiped out. Chong also exposed automatic vote padding and shaving manipulation by Smartmatic machines, plus what he says is missing and out-of-sequence ballot images. He confronted Smartmatic officials with reams of logs outlining this fraud. Other politicians in the Philippines turned up the heat.
I'm sorry I have to say this, and it seems a little harsh, but what they are not there to sell an electronic election system. They are there to give a method of cheating to whoever pays them the most.
Wow. Instead of providing answers, several Smartmatic officials left the country, including a veteran Smartmatic official named Hyder Garcia. This Venezuelan-born operative now serves, believe it or not, as election administrator for Tarrant County, Texas. That's a county which turned blue for the first time since 1964 after the introduction of new electronic voting machines. Well, evading scrutiny seems to be part of the vote hacking playbook. Last week, Dominion officials bailed out of a state legislative hearing in battleground Pennsylvania. GOP State Representative Dawn Kiefer asked the questions that Dominion won't answer.
Does Dominion use open source softwares so that observers can go in and they can see exactly what switches are being turned on and turned off? We don't know. Transparency is key. So if they're doing this, if they used open source software, right, we would know what's going on there. The average observer could take a look to see what that process is.
Who has control over our elections? Who has dominion over our votes? Is it we the people, or is it the electronic voting oligarchs? Without full election transparency, there can be no election peace.
Newsmax TV is now.
Of course, Newsmax TV is there, but TECNTV.com is there as well. And we want you to know that Joseph Stalin, the General Secretary for Russia, the dictator, put it best. The power is not in the hand of the person that votes. The power is in the hands of the ones that count the vote. I suggest you not give in, not give up, not give over. We have a lot of time in 14 days and more to turn this election around. SCOTUS, it's up to you, because the state legislatures do not have the moral courage to do what our founding fathers would have fought for, to turn this election back to Donald Trump. We'll be back, ladies and gentlemen, with more of the best in urban conservative talk right after this.